You heard it first. And I agree. I mean, with a 300,000 Bitcoin price this cycle, all we got to do is 3X in like the next several years. And all of a sudden, we're talking about realistically $1 million BTC. And that doesn't even take into effect like hyperinflation and all the other wild cards that could happen out in the markets, especially with other countries adopting Bitcoin and going on a Bitcoin standard. All right, welcome back to another episode of Crypto News Alerts. I'm your host, JV, a very special episode to share with you today. We have a live guest, Philip Swift, all the way from the other side of the world in the UK. I'm in Puerto Rico, holding it down, and I want to squash the controversy in the marketplace right now. We have a lot of analysts saying we're back in a bear market. Then others are saying, no way, Jose, zoom out and look at the charts. It's obvious and clear. We're still in a bull market, so he's going to be doing some live technical analysis and also be sharing where he feels we're likely to head before the end of this Bitcoin bull cycle. So without further ado, what's good, Philip? Let's dive right in.
Sure. Let's take a look. And I agree with you. It can be a little bit crazy on crypto Twitter, right? With everyone going back and forth as to whether we're in a bull or bear market. But there's quite a few indicators we can look at to give us a pretty good idea. So I'm going to jump right in. And I'm actually going to start with a couple of indicators that helped us over at Decent Trader identify that Bitcoin probably needed to cool down at the end of April before we entered this downtrend. And the first one is called the Predator indicator. So that's one that's available on the website. And it's a really useful tool to show when Bitcoin is either in an uptrend or in a downtrend. It's pretty simple. So we have the turquoise bars here. They tell us that it's time to start the uptrend. And then the bright green bars show us that Bitcoin's getting really bullish. Orange bars tell us to be a little bit cautious. And then the red bars tell us that actually Bitcoin probably does need to cool down and start entering a downtrend. You can see how well this has worked. I'm just on the weekly time frame here. It's worked really well for us over the past couple of years for Bitcoin. And if we just zoom in here up to the recent run up, so we can see Predator told us to go long from about 10K, pretty much all the way up actually to 60K mid-April. And then it started turning orange and telling us that actually we may need to pull back. And it's not surprising really, given that we had such an outstanding run all the way from 10K up to 60K. Not surprising that we have had to cool off a little bit here. Now, I'm going to zoom in on this in a minute to show that although we are still technically in this downtrend, there are actually some promising signs coming for Bitcoin in the near term. So that's the first indicator that's pretty interesting, pretty useful for us. The second is another one on the website under the live charts called the Pi Cycle Top Indicator. Now, this is a tool that I built and it has actually helped us identify the tops of each of Bitcoin's market cycles over the past 10 years. Super accurate, can pick out the tops to within 3 days, and it actually worked again for us over the past couple of months. Dead easy to use, just uses 2 moving averages. So we've got the 111-day moving average, the orange line, and then we've got a ×2 multiple of the 350-day moving average, that green line there. And what it tells us is that when the orange line catches up with the higher green, that tells us that the market is getting so overheated that Bitcoin price is about to top out. Now, I'm just going to zoom in a couple of previous cycles to show you how it works. When the orange line catches up with that line, we get this red dotted line here saying that they're crossing. And you can see back in 2013, it picked out the top to within a couple of days. Same here in December 2013, picked the top to within a day. And then if we zoom into 2017, the high there, you can see it actually got it to the day when we got up to just shy of $20,000. The reason why I'm talking about this is because we also had it again just a month ago when price marched all the way up to 60K. I wasn't sure if this indicator was going to work again, but in fact, it did when the orange line caught up with the green line, telling us that the market was too overheated. You can see the day later, 24 hours later, was when we actually topped out at 63.5K. And since then, we have been making our way down. So definitely worth keeping an eye on this indicator. The next time that orange line crosses up above the green line, it may signal to us that Bitcoin will top out again. But for now, you can see that the orange line is pulling back away from the green line. So it does suggest that actually we can move a lot higher before that happens. So we don't need to worry about that for now, for a little while. Now, if we zoom in nearer time frames, so we're going to do some technical analysis now. Here we've got Predator again on the weekly time frame. This really sums up where Bitcoin is at right now in the near term. So you can see, as I mentioned, Bitcoin price trended down here. But what is encouraging to see is that we have not yet broken this important weekly support level, which is around $32,000. So for now, we have held that weekly support, which is great. And we've managed to hold it now for the past month. So what we want to see is price continue to hold above that level. We don't want to be seeing many weekly closes below that level. That would be bearish. But for now, price has managed to hold above. And then the next target, we want to start closing back above that 200-day moving average around $42,000. If we do, then I would expect price to consolidate between there and weekly resistance up at around $59,000 for some time. And as a bit of a side note, I think if we do, that's probably going to result in some kind of alt season. So probably going to need to consolidate in this region for a little while. And then eventually I do think we'll break to the upside, and that's going to be macro bullish once we start closing above $59,000. So that's the near-term view, starting to look a bit better. And if we look at Predator across different time frames, you can see on the lower time frames here, so we've got the hourly, the 4-hour, the 12-hour, and the daily. They're all starting to look a bit better now, starting to turn green across those time frames. So in the near term, we are starting to see signs that Bitcoin may be ready to turn around.
Awesome. And it does seem all the whales are accumulating. They say those between 100 and 10,000 BTC are accumulating at all-time highs, which are the big institutions, the banks, and now the sovereign nations such as El Salvador adopting BTC as a legal tender. You mentioned the next alt season, which could be triggered once Bitcoin hits a critical point. Do you see one more alt season, like a big one for this year, or could there be multiples in your opinion?
So I think for this year, the best we can probably hope for in terms of an alt season is probably some consolidation in this region, as I say, between 43 to 59K for Bitcoin. Once that brings back the confidence in the market and Bitcoin goes sideways, then people are going to start moving down the risk curve, looking for alternative assets, various altcoins to outperform Bitcoin as it goes sideways, broadly speaking, within that range. And, you know, that's going to take a bit of time to do that. So I think for this year, that's probably the best we can hope for. Then going into next year, as I'll be in a moment, I am expecting Bitcoin to go on a major run. And when that happens, it probably will take altcoins with it as well. So I do expect the whole of the market to do really well next year once Bitcoin goes on its major run. And the reason why I think that is, well, I'm going to show you a few charts now as to why I think Bitcoin still has a long way to go this cycle. And the first is stock to flow, which I know, JV, you've covered on your show as well before. Super interesting model. And I think it's at a very critical point right now. I'll explain why. So stock to flow model is a basic model which looks at the supply of Bitcoin coming into the market, and it tries to map out a potential route for future Bitcoin price. So you can see on this chart, there's three things to look at. The first is the price line, which is colored like a rainbow in this instance because it is showing us the number of days up until the halving on this scale here. But you can recognize the price line there. And then the second important line is this blue line here. So that is the actual stock to flow line. And that is forecasted using the supply schedule of Bitcoin. And you can see over the past 10 years, Bitcoin's history, or more than 10 years, that they have broadly correlated and price has broadly stayed in line with stock to flow. Now, we are at a very interesting point here because price has now pulled back from the stock to flow line to around 34K. And you can see I built this divergence tool here at the bottom of the stock to flow live chart. And what it shows us is how far price is moving away from the stock to flow line. When price is above the stock to flow line, this divergence tool goes red. And when it starts tracking below, it turns green. And the reason why it does that is because historically, when price has been below the stock to flow line, that has proven to be very attractive prices to start stacking sats, right? And because we know that historically price has then trended back towards and above the stock to flow line. And right now you can see that on this divergence tool, price has pulled as far away actually as we did here in the last bull run. So we pulled pretty far back. And obviously, this tool could be invalidated, but given what I'm seeing on chain, like the things you mentioned, JV, in terms of, whales accumulating, and I'll come on to show some of the things in a moment, I don't think this tool is going to be invalidated over the next 12, 18 months. I think it's probably going to hold. It's certainly got a higher probability of holding. And when we compare this point on the divergence to the last time it was this far away, it was actually this point here in the 2017 bull run. Price pulled back from $3,000 back to $1,900. Now, I was actually involved in Bitcoin at that point, and I remember how scary that was. Actually felt pretty similar, I think, for a lot of people to this recent pullback we've had here. Now, looking at that point, what happened after there? 1,900. We then went on back up to the stock to the flow line, and then rallied on all the way up to just shy of $20,000. So about a tenfold increase. So if we look at where we're at now, we're around 34K today. Similar things to happen if it were to play out like that this time round. That would obviously be taking us well past the stock to flow line up to around $300,000. So I do think that is possible this time round as well. Certainly comfortably past $100,000 and potentially up to around 300K. So very interesting point right now on stock to flow.
And do you see the Bitcoin price peaking for this cycle this year or the following year? Because you did mention you see a big run up occurring next year. So I was curious your intake on that.
Yeah, so I think we're probably going to need to spend a little bit of time consolidating after this correction. And if we are going to head all the way up to highs like that, it is going to take us probably a little bit of time. I mean, obviously, we're hearing about various countries starting to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. So if big countries start announcing that, that will accelerate the price. But what I'm seeing at the moment and looking at various things on chain, as I'll show you in a second, I do think that we're probably going to be heading into next year when we eventually top out. So giving us, a bit more time to stack those sats and accumulate. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, right on. And Plan B does mention if Bitcoin doesn't hit a minimal of $100,000 by December, he says then the stock to flow would be invalidated. And that's him saying that himself. I firmly believe in the stock to flow. I believe it is the most accurate price prediction model since the inception of Bitcoin. And I love all these tools that you have that just make it a lot easier for traders to understand when there's tops so that they could, do what they got to do to take profits or know when to hodl, when to accumulate and all that fun stuff. I'm going to be sure to include a link to Decent Trader along with all these tools in the show notes right below this video in the description. So any of you watching this will be able to take advantage of that and have these same tools that Philip is currently showing us.
Brilliant. Thanks, JB. Right. So onwards we go. Now, next one I'm going to show, I think is really interesting. So here we're looking at some on-chain data, understanding what long-term holders are doing with their Bitcoin. And this helps us understand what may come in the next 12 months. So this is the 1 year HODL chart. Again, available under the live chart section of the Decent Trader website. And it is telling us the percentage of Bitcoin that has ever been mined that have not moved on chain for at least a year. Okay, so this orange line here is showing us that percentage. So the percentage of Bitcoin that has not moved from one wallet to another wallet over the past 12 months. And that gives us a pretty good idea of hodlers, so long-term hodlers, what they're doing with their Bitcoin and when they're prepared to sell. Now, what you'll notice, obviously we have price here, the white line on the chart, and we have the orange line, which is the HODL line. They tend to have an inverse relationship as we move through Bitcoin cycles. So when price is down in the depths of the bear market, we see the orange line, the HODL line, is quite high. And when we're reaching the tops of Bitcoin's price cycles, the HODL line comes down. And the reason for that is due to market psychology. So in the depths of the bear market, this is where the OGs, the whales, they are accumulating their Bitcoin because they know, or they strongly believe, that price will be higher in the future. So they're accumulating as much Bitcoin as they can, and they then HODL that Bitcoin. And that's why this percentage stays high through the bear market and in the early stages of the bull run, because they know that price is going to be high, and they don't want to start taking profit until much later on. As price then makes its way through the bull market higher and higher, we see the whales and long-term hodlers start to take profit, and this 1 year HODL line comes down as those Bitcoin are moved from one wallet to another, until eventually we top out. And I've highlighted the tops of the markets here by these red dots. Okay, and so we can see last cycle, when we topped out, the 1 year HODL line was down at around 43%. Right now, the HODL line is still all the way up at 54%. So this tells us that hodlers are not prepared to sell their Bitcoin at these prices at all. Whether it's 60K or 30K, you can see it hasn't really changed much. This is telling us that they are hodling strong and therefore restricting supply of Bitcoin until price goes higher. And I think looking at this, it has a decent chance of still going quite a lot higher. So if we're at 54% now, last time we were at 54% last cycle was actually, once again, when price was around that $2,000 mark, and we know what happened after that. And so this does suggest to me that we've still got a long way to go, a lot of price appreciation before the HODL wave comes down to around probably about 45% this cycle would be when I would consider this done, and when we may be close to topping out. And so I think that's going to comfortably take us well beyond 100K. But as I mentioned, it could take us a few months, maybe into next year. But I do think as we move into next year, we'll be cruising past 100 and probably quite a bit higher.
Right on. Love it. 300,000, I feel, is a great target for this cycle. So you say you can see the Bitcoin dominance going as low as about 45% this cycle. And how high do you expect it to climb up when it's at an all-time high? Do you think it'll be in the 90s again?
I think that one is a tricky one to answer, because it's going to very much depend on not only Bitcoin, but what altcoins do as well, in terms of how certain sectors of altcoins are adopted, right? So I think if we see, I'm just trying to find the dominance chart here. I know I've got it somewhere, so just bear with me. I think if we see DeFi really take off, and we see other sectors really take off, then we could see dominance actually trend down to all-time lows. So let me just zoom out here. And what we're going to see is actually dominance is up at resistance right now. So if I zoom out here, you're going to see the dominance chart has been in this massive triangle for a long time. It then dropped out of the triangle. So this is the Bitcoin dominance, dropped out as we had a bit of an alt season running in towards the end of May. And we had a decent trader actually had these 3 target levels here. You can see dominance dropped right down to the second target level and then bounced up hard up to weekly resistance here, which is where we are now. So if we think Bitcoin has bottomed, and I think if Bitcoin starts to trend upwards and range, then we may see it move up to around 50%. But then I think if Bitcoin starts ranging, as I mentioned earlier, then I do think we could very comfortably start to see dominance trend back down, and we do get some kind of alt season. And ultimately, I do think at some point this cycle, dominance is going to move back down towards around 36K. Around 36% on the dominance.
Wow. So that would be a great indicator for like a legitimate alt rally, right? If Bitcoin dominance got that low, like broke a certain point, like would you say 45% or a certain level?
Exactly. I mean, if we start trending back down here, this is your alt season around here. Once we start moving back down into these target areas, that's going to be an alt season. And we know how crazy things can get like previous cycles. So it may be that we do breach down below there. But for now, I think I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, because we still need to see what Bitcoin's going to do first. There's a lot that Bitcoin can do, but really we do need it to be ranging up at a comfortable level, I think, to allow an alt season to play out and for that dominance to drop.
Agreed. And I do have a question regarding Ethereum. There's a lot of analysts talking about a potential flippening as far as the market cap, because we all know it took Bitcoin like about 12 years to reach $1 trillion market cap. And Ethereum will probably outpace it because it's well on its way. It's already almost half of like Bitcoin's market cap. Could you see a flippening in that sense as far as the market cap is concerned?
I think the jury's out on that one. It is possible. It is possible. It's going to take some real. I don't want to stake my name on that. I'm far less certain on that than I am with a lot of the on-chain analysis of Bitcoin, because I do think Bitcoin is going to do very well this cycle also. So whilst I do think Ethereum is really impressive and I am bullish on it, it is going to take a lot of work to do that flippening, but I think it's going to get at least very close.
Awesome. And one last question as far as predictions are concerned. So for this cycle, you can see a top of 300,000. What could you project into the future of the next cycle halving, which occurs in 2024? So let's say 2025 or even 2026. What can you see in the future for Bitcoin along that stage? Could you see it hitting $1 million?
I do. I think that we're already starting to see the little green shoots that are going to lay the foundations for Bitcoin eventually reaching up at those levels. So let me just, if I just move back to the stock to flow model for a minute. Obviously we can see on stock to flow, that is forecasting around that time that we do trend up to there. And I think to get up there, it is going to take mass adoption, not only from people, but from governments as well. But, given the news we saw, as you mentioned right at the start, JV, with El Salvador coming online for Bitcoin, I think that is, easily possible. So I think with institutions as well, high net worth individuals, I do think it pays to be patient with Bitcoin. If there's one thing I've learned over my relatively short time in the space, I haven't been in since the early days, but it really does pay to just keep stacking those sats and be patient. And I do think it is possible that Bitcoin can get there eventually.
Awesome. Love it. You heard it first. And I agree. I mean, with a 300,000 Bitcoin price this cycle, all we got to do is 3X in like the next several years. And all of a sudden we're talking about realistically $1 million BTC. And that doesn't even take into effect like hyperinflation and all the other wild cards that could happen out in the markets, especially with other countries adopting Bitcoin and going on a Bitcoin standard and moving away from fiat as the dollar continues to do this. Yeah, man, I appreciate you coming out here and being so generous with your time. I always learn a lot, learning from you. And I'm just, I greatly appreciate you dedicating your time to come, share with the audience here at Crypto News Alerts. And once again, for everyone watching this, I'll include a link to where you can actually purchase this tool. Is this one tool? Can you tell us more about this particular tool that you're using?
The one I used earlier was Predator. Is that the one with the red bars? This one here? Is that the one you mean?
Yeah, that one was the one predicting the market tops, right?
Exactly. So that is Predator tool. It's available on the Decent Trader website. You just go to tools and trading indicators. It's available there to buy. Super useful for traders, but like I say, it is also useful for investors if you're just trying to understand on high time frames how to manage your risk. And then all the other tools are also available on the website. This one, dead simple, Bitcoin investor tool. So this one's more just for basic investors who want to understand when's a great time to stack sats. You can see in this green zone here, and when is the market getting overheated, you can see the red zones here. So loads of tools like these that you can check out there. This one is just free to view. And this one's showing, look, we're back in the middle of the zone, plenty of time, and we're going to be comfortably above 100K when we start topping out this cycle and start getting into that overbought zone.
Love it, bro. And I couldn't agree more. I'd love to see a $300,000 Bitcoin price before the end of this cycle. And I feel like it's such a blessing to be involved in crypto during this time, because what are we? A mere $1.5 trillion market cap in the entire industry. Eventually, it'll be 10 trillion, 20 trillion, 100 trillion. That's when things will get interesting. So once again, thank you, Philip. Show Philip some love in the comments right down below if you gain value from him being here, and maybe we'll do this again. Thanks again, Philip.